Well, learners, let me take this opportunity and welcome you in today's lesson. Today we are going to look at development. Firstly, before we start to discuss in details development, let's start by looking at the terminology of development. Development. What is development? Development is the use of resources and technology to bring about change. This change is positive and generally involves the improvement in people's quality of life and improving the standard of living in a country. So in other words, development brings positive change. So if there's development, there's positive change which seeks to improve the quality of life and the standard of living. For example, if you can check in these pictures that I've attached here, the first picture, you can see that there are squatter camps. You can see that there's no development in this case. Then, if there's development, now they provide these people with proper houses, proper infrastructure, with water and sanitation. So you can see in the second picture, now there is development. Now these people will be staying in proper houses. So you can see that development, it's a process that brings change, improve the standard of living, improve the quality of life. Then, in order to understand development, we are going to discuss in detail development indicators. Development indicators. What are development indicators? Development indicators are used to measure the level of development with regard to countries' economy, social, and institutional growth. There are two main types of economic indicators and social indicators. There are two main types of development indicators. We will look at economic indicators and social indicators. Then when we talk about development indicators, these ones, they compare the level of development of countries. We use the development indicators to compare the level of development of countries. Then now we are going to start by looking at economic indicators. Economic indicators, the first one that we are going to discuss is gross domestic product. What is gross domestic product? Gross domestic product is the value of all goods and services produced by a country in 1 year. The total value of all goods and services produced by a country in 1 year. So secondly, we have the gross domestic product per capita. Then with this one, the GDP per capita is the value of goods and services produced by a country in a year, divided by the total number of people living in the country. So in other words, to get the GDP per capita, we take the GDP and we divide it by the population of the country. Then we get the GDP per capita. By doing that, we get to see how much each person contributes to the GDP. Then we also have, in economic indicators, we also have the gross national product. The gross national product is the total value of all goods and services produced by a country in 1 year, and it includes foreign earnings. Then another economic indicator that we have is your Gini coefficient. It indicates how wealth is shared in a country. A Gini score of 0 indicates complete equality in income, which means that in every household receive the same amount of money, but it can't get to 0. What you need to understand in this regard is that if we have a Gini coefficient that is closer to 0, it shows that at least the majority of the population, they are doing well economically. They can afford things, right? But if we have a Gini score of 1, indicates complete inequality, then in this case, it simply means that income received is not the same. How one household get more than the other. So there's complete inequality. So, but what we need to understand in relation to this is that if we have a Gini score coefficient that is closer to 1, can be 0.8 or 0.9, 0.7, closer to 1. It shows that there's inequality. The majority of the population are poor, then only few individuals are doing well. It's another economic indicator. Then as we discuss, as we continue with development, we need to look at the structure of the economy, because the structure of the economy, it informs us how this country actually is doing, because when we note the economic activities of those countries. Then in this case, there are 4 main economic sectors. The first one is the primary sector of the economy. The primary sector of the economy is concerned with the extraction of raw materials from the natural environment. That's the primary sector. It includes your forestry, your fishing, your mining, everything that has to concern with extraction of raw material. Secondly, we have the secondary sector of the economy. Then the secondary sector of the economy, activities that deals with processing of the raw materials. The industries that deals with processing of the raw material, they fall in the secondary sector of the economy. Also things like manufacturing, construction, and other industries that deals with processing of raw material, they fall in the secondary sector of the economy. When they process these goods, we then refer to those goods that are processed by the industries as the value-added goods. And then thirdly, we have the tertiary sector of the economy. The tertiary sector of the economy involves the provision of services to the wider community, also known as the service sector or service industry. So in other words, tertiary sector of the economy has to do with the provision of services. Then lastly, we have the quaternary sector of the economy. This sector is high-tech sector of an economy that is linked to research and development, concerned with the collection and analysis and transmission of information. That's the quaternary sector of the economy. As you can see in my next slide or diagrams, you can see that the primary sector, as I've mentioned, deals with the extraction of raw material. That's why you can see that mining, agriculture, farming, fishing, forestry, and mineral extraction such as oil, it falls in the primary sector of the economy. While we are on this one, you need to understand that countries that are less economically developed, their economy focuses more on the primary sector because they don't have the industries that deals with processing the raw material, that deals with manufacturing. Secondly, the secondary sector of the economy, it deals with the industries that processes the raw material, like your industries that process the raw material, manufacturing as well, pharmaceutical companies as well, construction also falls in this sector of the economy. And then the tertiary sector as well, as I've mentioned, that it deals with the issue of offering of services. And then you need to understand that as well, your trade, your tourism, your transport also falls in the tertiary sector of the economy. And then now we have countries that are less economically developed, and then we have countries that are more economically developed. Then let's compare the two countries so that we can understand the concept of development better. The more economically developed countries, they have resources and they use their resources efficiently so. And secondly, the more economically developed countries, when it comes to the structure of the economy, they have more of industries that deals with processing of the raw materials. They have more of industries that deals with manufacturing. So their economy is highly industrialized when we compare it with the less economically developed countries. And then thirdly, the standard of living is very high. They have proper houses, they have proper infrastructure, their standard of living is high. Then the more economically developed countries, They have access to better education. They have access to better healthcare facilities and proper medicine. The transport system, it's of high quality as well. So those are the characteristics of the more economically developed countries. They export more of processed goods. They export more of manufactured goods as well. Also, the more economically developed countries, they have stable governments, which is able as well to donate and assist other countries financially, which are not doing well. As you can see, most of the European countries and USA, those countries are doing well economically. They are more economically developed than African countries. That is why they are able to offer financial aid. They are able to assist some of the African countries. Then we have less economically developed countries. These less economically developed countries, they export raw materials because they don't have industries that deal with processing of raw materials. They're not highly industrialized. The less economically developed countries, they're not highly industrialized. And then when it comes to the less economically developed countries, there's high rate of unemployment, there's high poverty levels because people are poor, they cannot afford. Inefficient education, as well, when it comes to health, the situation is very bad. They don't even afford proper healthcare. They don't even afford proper healthcare facilities as well. Imports, they rely on imports. They cannot make their own. They rely more on imports, especially when it comes to value-added goods and other stuff. And then they receive financial aid from the more economically developed countries. So, you know, when we understand the structure of the economy, we then understand that when it comes to the more economically developed countries that are doing well, they have more of industries, which ensures that there's economic growth, there's employment, then does it improve, it brings about development. Then with the less economically developed countries, their economy focuses more on primary activities, and there's high level of unemployment. The majority of the population are poor, and thus it affects the development. That's why they are very much behind when it comes to development. Then now let's look at social indicators. Social indicators, we have what we call Human Development Index. It is a method of assessing the levels of development of a country by focusing on the quality of life and standard of living of its people. Human Development Index focuses on 3 areas, measures these 3 things of well-being of people in the country. It looks at life expectancy, also look at education, also the standard of living. Then when it comes to Human Development Index, countries are ranked along the continuum or index of human development. The index runs between 0 and 1. Then a country has a high development ranking if it has a Human Development Index of 0.8 or above. So if a country has Human Development Index of 0.8 or above, that means that most of its population enjoys a long and healthy life, has a decent standard of living, and has equal access to education. So if a country has a development index that has about 0.5 or less, so it shows that the country is not doing well in terms of the population have less life expectancy and the quality of life is low as well. They don't afford proper healthcare facilities, or the country does not have proper healthcare facilities and other things which relates to social. Human Development Index emphasizes the importance of people of a country when assessing the level of development of a country. You see, when a country is developed, people should enjoy healthy lifestyle, people should enjoy proper healthcare facilities and medication. So if that's not the case, then it shows that the country is not developed. Then now let's look at the following things that relates to Human Development Index as well. The life expectancy, In this case, we are looking at the average number of years a person can expect to live. So it's one of the factors used to calculate Human Development Index. For example, the countries that are more economically developed, their life expectancy is high. Why? It's because people are able to live healthy lifestyle. They have access to proper healthcare facilities or proper healthcare services. That is why their life expectancy is high. But when it comes to the less economically developed countries, their life expectancy is low because they don't afford proper healthcare services, and their countries are poor. They don't provide proper healthcare services. Then birth rate. The birth rate is the term used to define the number of babies born every year per 1,000 people in a population. So in this case, countries that are doing well economically in terms of development, they have what? They have low birth rate because their population can afford things like proper health, proper family planning. They can do that, right? And then death rate is the term used to define the number of deaths every year per 1,000 people in a population. So in this case, countries that are more developed, countries that are doing well economically, their death rate is low. But with countries that are not doing well economically, which are poor, the less economically developed countries, their death rate is high because the life expectancy is also less because of the things that we have discussed earlier. Infant mortality rate, the number of children who die because of childhood-related and other diseases. Then let us also look at demographic indicators. Demographic indicators are population statistics. They are population statistics. For example, population statistics, it looks at the population size, the population density, the sex ratio, and the dependency ratio. And then you also have your visual statistics, which include things like your vital statistics, which include things like your birth rate, your death rate, your growth rate, and life expectancy at birth, and mortal and fertility rate. So these demographic indicators, they show actually how the country is doing in terms of development. As I've mentioned earlier, when we are comparing the less economically developed countries and the more economically developed countries. And in the previous slides, we have mentioned that the more economically developed countries, they have low birth rate, low death rate, and the life expectancy at birth is very high because of the proper healthcare services that they provide, as when we compare to them with the less economically developed countries. More economically developed countries are highly industrialized countries. They are characterized by significant technological development, high income, high GDP per capita, and low population growth rates. Then example of such countries can include countries like your United States, your Canada, your Japan, and many countries in Europe. Those countries, they are more economically developed countries. They have their population growth is very low, and they're doing well economically. And their GDP per capita as well is very high. Then now let us look at the less economically developed countries. These countries are characterized by minimal industrialization. They have less industries. They have low technological development, and they also have low GDP per capita. And they're not doing well actually. They have high population growth rates, which also affects their level of development. Then many of these countries are found in Asia, found in Africa, are found in Central and South America. Then now let us look at the Branded line. The Branded line actually is used to show us that all the countries that are in the north, they are developed. Countries that are located in the south, those ones, they are not well developed. The Branded line is used to divide the world into halves. The developed North, which is rich, industrialized, and the developing South, which is poor. Then the Branded Line may also be referred to as the North-South divide. It is important to remember that the Branded Line is not the same as the equator. It's not the same as the equator. And then there are some countries that are found in the Southern Hemisphere, but when it comes to the Branded Line, we say they are in the North. For example, Australia. Australia is found in the Southern Hemisphere, but in terms of the Branded Line, we say it's in the North because Australia is developed, is doing well economically. The countries that are located in the North, they are more economically developed than when you compare them with the countries that are located in the South. So as you can see, a comparative between the North and the South. The developed North countries, the population, they have less population. Wealth income, they constitute of about 87% of the wealth income gap. The small gap between the rich and the poor from the more economically developed countries in the North. Their life expectancy ranges from about 70 to 84 years. Investment, high investments, they're doing well economically. And then they also have proper infrastructure. And then when it comes to social conditions, they have high standard of living. There's relatively low in terms of poverty. But when it comes to the developing South, the countries that are located south of the Branded Line, the population is very high in those countries. They constitute of about 13% of the wealth income. The small gap, actually there's large gap between the rich and the poor. Then their life expectancy can reach about 40 to 60. And there's low investment in terms of goods and infrastructure. Infrastructure as well is poorly developed. And their standard of living is very, very bad. Poor standard of living. Poverty, high levels of unemployment in the countries that are found south of the Branded Line. High levels of unemployment. The population is very, very poor. Only few individuals are doing well economically. Well, I would like to take this opportunity and thank you for today's lesson. Please subscribe to my channel. Please like and subscribe to my channel. I hope I managed to teach you the concept of development well. Please also comment if there are certain things that you want to comment about in terms of the lesson. Thank you very much.